Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the hidden mechanics of feeling stuck. But more importantly, we're going to lay out the exact roadmap you need to become the hero of your own narrative. I mean, let's be honest for a second. Have you ever felt like you're fighting the exact same battles over and over and over again? Like you're trapped in this endless maze, and no matter which turn you take, it seemingly leads you right back to square one? It is a deeply, profoundly exhausting place to be. Well, stick with me, because today we are going to learn exactly how to break those chains and completely rewrite your story.
Think about the quote right here. You carried weight you didn't choose, but you forged yourself out of stone. You know, you probably carried weight that no kid, no teenager, really no person should ever have to carry alone. A lot of us were born into a battlefield we simply didn't choose, lugging around physical, emotional, or even social burdens that we absolutely never asked for. But I really want to make something abundantly clear right from the jump today. This struggle, it is not a curse. It's actually the raw material, the literal forge of your destiny. You are not broken. You're just caught in a cycle. And the beautiful, undeniable truth about cycles is that every single one of them can be shattered.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the myth of destiny, move into the anatomy of a loop, then zoom out to look at the gravity of poverty before getting into some highly actionable stuff with the art of disruption, and finally, the hero returns.
Let's jump right into part one. The myth of destiny. Cycles are patterns, not life sentences. There is this pervasive, absolute myth of destiny out there that tells us our loops, our cycles of avoidance, of toxic shame, of crippling overthinking, that these are permanent character flaws, like they're just fundamentally who we are. But take a step back and think about the loops you know all too well in your own life. Maybe it's an avoidance loop, right? Where fear leads to this quick, temporary hit of relief, only to build into a significantly bigger, scarier fear for tomorrow. Or perhaps it's an overthinking loop, where just a little bit of uncertainty spirals into total, paralyzing mental exhaustion. These endless cycles feel entirely eternal because they feed themselves. But here's the secret. They are completely mechanical. They are not mystical, they're not magic. In fact, researchers actually suggest that up to 40% of our daily actions are just automated habits. And because they are literally just mechanical wiring in your nervous system, they are entirely capable of being broken once we deliberately introduce a new variable into the equation.
To really get this, we have to look at what's going on under the hood. Inside your head, there is a literal biological turf war happening right this second. On one side of the ring, we have the prefrontal cortex. This is the newest, slowest, but most highly evolved region of your brain. It's where your conscious willpower, your logic, and your long-term dreams live. It's the you that you think of as you. But on the other side, we have the basal ganglia. This is an ancient, machine-like set of gears buried deep, deep within the brain. And this is exactly where your deeply automated habit loops are safely stored away. So, when you feel stuck and you just can't seem to make a change no matter how badly you want to, I need you to hear this. It is not a moral failing. It is a literal biological conflict playing out between these two distinct areas of your brain.
And this dynamic brings us to exactly why you felt like you were failing all this time. Fighting a deeply encoded habit with raw willpower is, well, it's basically like trying to stop a massive, heavy piece of industrial machinery with your bare hands. It's totally exhausting, and honestly, you're going to lose. The fast, highly automated dopamine trap of the basal ganglia will almost always win out. Why? Because your brain is biologically wired to prioritize instant relief over long-term growth. It's an evolutionary energy-saving device doing exactly what it was built to do across thousands of years, keep you safe, warm, and comfortable inside the cave. So, to win this battle, we have to stop blaming our character. We have to start outsmarting our own ancient machinery.
Which brings us to part two, the anatomy of a loop, or the architecture of being stuck.
To actually defeat this automated machine, we first have to thoroughly understand its underlying architecture. Every single stuck pattern you have follows this exact four-stage sequence. Let's paint a picture here. Imagine you get a vague, highly stressful email from your boss late on a Friday afternoon. Hey, we need to talk on Monday. We've all been there, right? Okay, so first, we have the launch. That stress trigger completely kicks things off. Second, overload. Your nervous system immediately spikes with cortisol and suddenly demands immediate relief from that terrible feeling. Third, the old story kicks in. Your mind aggressively applies a familiar limiting meaning to the event, whispering things like, I'm definitely going to get fired. I'm a total failure. And finally, stage 4, the protection move. This is where an automatic behavior completely takes over the steering wheel. So instead of drafting a calm, clarifying reply, what do? You doom scroll social media for 3 straight hours on the couch. Or maybe you snap at your partner over dinner. You do this to get an instant neurochemical distraction from the pain. The really wild part? Once this loop is encoded, your brain just stops questioning it entirely. It just automatically runs the script every single time your inbox pings.
Moving on to part 3, the gravity of poverty. Let's look at the systemic traps around us. We've thoroughly explored the micro level of the brain so far, but being stuck isn't just an internal mental phenomenon, is it? It's very often a physical and systemic one. In fact, the structural gravity of a historically impoverished neighborhood operates almost identically to those automated mental loops inside our brain. Internally, nervous system habits pull you back into old behaviors on autopilot. But externally, socioeconomic factors create a literal gravity well that aggressively pulls families back into intergenerational poverty. Both of these are deeply entrenched systems designed, whether intentionally or just through decades of historic neglect, to keep you exactly where you are. And just like fighting the basal ganglia, escaping structural poverty is incredibly difficult without generating an incredible amount of escape velocity. When we objectively look at the structural forces of the poverty cycle, the gravity becomes absolutely undeniable. Think about how these pieces lock together. Underfunded schools lead directly to fewer, lower-paying job opportunities down the road. Those low-wage labor markets then make it mathematically impossible to build any meaningful savings. Add in systemic housing segregation and a complete lack of social safety nets, and you are left with a wildly precarious house of cards. A single everyday emergency, a broken-down car you rely on for work, or a surprise medical bill can cause a family to fall deeply into insurmountable debt almost overnight. The immense difficulty of escaping poverty comes directly from these structural forces constantly reinforcing each other, interlocking, just like massive steel gears in a machine. Decades of sociology emphasize this point. Poverty is a systemic condition. It is a structural loop. It is not a personal failure.
But here is the profound, kind of non-obvious truth that should honestly give all of us massive hope. Poverty is a loop, yes, but loops break when systems change. Think of it exactly like a train that is stuck going around and around on a circular track. Just like a deeply ingrained neural pathway in your brain, the intergenerational cycle of poverty is completely disrupted when external interventions are intentionally introduced to switch the tracks. Access to quality education, affordable housing, stable employment. These aren't just nice perks or political talking points. They are fundamental structural changes. When you successfully change the environment, you remove that intense gravity, and you break the cycle entirely.
Let's transition to part 4, the art of disruption. Precision over force.
So knowing all of this, how do we actually begin dismantling these incredibly complex internal and external traps? Well, it requires precision, not brute force. You have to become a highly curious, completely objective scientist of your own mind. Stage 1 of this disruption is radical awareness. You have to start observing and recording your triggers entirely without judgment. That's the hard part. Don't viciously beat yourself up for eating the whole sleeve of cookies. Just calmly note the exact emotion that caused you to open the pantry door in the first place. Pinpoint the exact launch trigger that starts your personal cycle. Start noticing the subtle physical sensations in your body just milliseconds before the behavior happens. Does your chest tighten? Does your jaw clench? You simply cannot change a pattern you cannot clearly see. Now, radical awareness doesn't magically stop the loop immediately, but it is the absolute critical first step that begins to fundamentally loosen the iron grip of your autopilot.
Once you can clearly see the pattern, you must introduce the ultimate weapon, the pattern interrupt. There is a famous, incredibly powerful psychological concept that essentially says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. By deliberately creating a physical or mental pause, whether that's taking a deep, stabilizing breath, physically stepping away from your desk, or even saying a specific grounding word out loud to yourself, you actively jolt your brain out of autopilot. You are intentionally, forcefully widening that microscopic space between the trigger and the response. The entire goal here is to buy yourself enough time to stay grounded in your prefrontal cortex, that smart center of willpower and logic we talked about, long enough before the ancient basal ganglia completely takes over the wheel.
Now, I have to be real with you. Real transformation is not a single magical breakthrough. I know we all desperately want it to be this quick, inspiring movie montage with cool music, but it's just not. It is a deliberate, fiercely practiced cycle of reps. First, you need awareness to specifically name the pattern when it happens. Second, expression to consciously claim a new choice in that moment. Third, and honestly perhaps most importantly, compassion. You must relentlessly replace the toxic shame that feeds the loop with deep understanding. Beating yourself up only triggers more stress, which, guess what, just restarts the loop all over again. And fourth, practicing these new ways consistently. Research heavily shows it takes anywhere from 18 to 254 days of daily practice to build an entirely new default neural pathway. It's a massive range, but it means you have to put in the grueling reps even when it feels incredibly messy and you slip up.
But stick with it, because thanks to the absolute miracle of neuroplasticity, your brain is never a fixed permanent system. It behaves exactly like a muscle. Every single millisecond you hold that pause, every single time you bravely choose to shatter the chain instead of giving in to that quick dopamine trap, you aren't just suppressing a bad habit. No, you are actually casting a powerful biological vote for your future self. With every single new choice, you are actively rewiring the complex machinery of your mind, proving to yourself that the cycle finally, definitively ends with you.
Which brings us to our final chapter, Part 5, The Hero Returns, the Ascension from the Battlefield. This is where we see your ultimate transformation, the profound journey from merely being a survivor to becoming a legend in your own story. Look, you may have started out deeply isolated. You may have been constantly underestimated or heavily trapped by intense systemic forces of poverty, bad environments, or generational trauma that you simply inherited. But by doing the agonizing, unglamorous, day-by-day work of rewiring your own brain and fiercely pushing back against those external forces, you became the master architect of your reality. You quite literally carved yourself out of the very stone that life unfairly tried to trap you in.
This is the absolute truth of the classic hero's journey, or what we might elegantly call the Jedi path. Just look at these unshakable pillars you've built through this process. You have discipline, but it was born directly from surviving relentless chaos. You have strength, born from enduring unimaginable suffering. You have compassion, born from moments of deep, quiet loneliness when no one was there for you. And you have purpose, born out of your profound pain. By breaking the loop, you have fully transcended your origin story. And the absolute best part of all of this, the hero's journey always ends with a return. You return to your community as an ascended protector, someone who uses their hard-earned power, their wisdom, and their deep, authentic empathy to tirelessly lift up those who are still tragically caught in the loop. You become the exact person your younger self desperately needed all along.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to gently leave you with this final, vital thought. The power to break the cycle, whether it's a suffocating internal loop of paralyzing self-doubt or a towering systemic, generational barrier that you're fiercely fighting to overcome, is quite literally in your hands right now. It exists entirely in that tiny, miraculous space between a sudden trigger and your chosen response. The machinery is waiting for a new input. The tracks can finally be switched. So what will you intentionally choose to do with that tiny space today? How will you courageously step up and interrupt the loop? Start today, cast your vote, and begin your ascension. Thanks for joining me.